So for the next method, I'm going to put all these in a folder here and hide that. The next method is really tricky. This is the kind of photo where it's going to be hard to pull that hair out of there, especially because it is almost exactly the same color as the background. If you really zoom in, yeah, you can see some of the hair, but that's really, really hard. So there's a couple ways I can tackle this, and I'm going to show how to use the pen tool with this, and I'm not going to cut out the full thing with the pen tool because that does take a long time, and I'm honestly not very good with the pen tool. I don't really care to use it. But as a selection method, I'm going to cut out her head and shoulders and then show you how to go from there. So with the pen tool, that would be on your toolbar. And basically what you do is you zoom in pretty far. I usually go 100%. And then some people kind of make a bunch of little dots just right on the selection line. And you can also click and drag for curves if you want to do wider curves. I don't tend to do that because sometimes you get weird contours. But if you zoom in pretty far and just really click right where that line is going to be, and with things like this little bit of the eyebrow here, kind of go around that. That doesn't need to be super precise because we will be using some other methods to get that. So that you're basically just that'll be cleaned up later, but on the larger contours, you want to have that. You want to get it as precise as possible. Now here is where I will use a curve. So I click and drag until that's right about where I want that curve to be. And then I Alt click on that to take away that handle so that it won't give me a strange curve there coming out of it. And I'm going to use a curve here. And I didn't care for that placement, so I Control-Z undo. And that's part of why I have this huge history right here. I find myself going back many, many different levels sometimes, and that does take up a lot in your system. So if you have a slower computer, or your computer's running very slowly, or you don't have a lot of scratch files, you might not want to have this much history levels, but I tend to work really well, mostly because I undo things and change my mind a lot. So I don't like those placements of the anchors. Now this edge that I'm working on right now, this is the kind of edge that would really not show up well at all in the quick select. It would have a very hard time finding that because it's almost exactly the same black. And we might still need to do a little bit of cleanup. But it shouldn't be too much. Alright, I think I'm right about at her shoulder. So I'm just going to go straight over to here. Zoom in again. I'm zooming in with the Control plus and the Control minus on my keyboard. So this does take a little bit of time. It's pretty precise. A lot of people like to do this, and it's just a matter of preference, especially if you're doing anything that has a lot of sharp edges. It's really great. Alright, I'm going to take this one big curve so it's not taking up so much time here. So her hair. Here's where we go in and get it as close as possible to the contour line. And it's a little hard to see here. But it's pretty close. Alright, so I've connected my path here. And what I'm going to do is make that a selection. And then hit my mask button. And so that has selected out this part of my model. And I didn't do her whole body, just that top part. But if you zoom in, you'll see it is a really, really clean selection. And there's a few parts that are just a little off. Whoops. I need to make sure I have black on to erase. White adds to a mask and black erases the mask. So I always give this a quick look over, make sure there's no weird edges here. But it's a really, for the most part, pretty tight selection. And the nice thing about doing the pen tool is often you don't have the halos that you'd normally get with quick select, so you're not going to have to go in and draw that out. But yeah, I have a really tight selection here. Now, sometimes when you have hair like this that's really dark, it takes a bit of finessing to get it to come into where you'd really like it to be. So there's several methods, and I'm going to try a few of them. And to be honest, every time I do a selection, I'm not entirely sure which method will work best, so just follow me along as I go here. So I am going to first go into Select and Mask. And see how much this will bring me. Alright, it's not behaving very well. I'm going to increase my brush size just a little bit. And let's see, when I want to bring out these lashes, it's wanting to subtract them. So I'm going to go in really far, decrease my brush size, and the brush size keyboard shortcuts are open bracket and close bracket. So I'm going to really decrease that. and go in and just try and paint out as much of the black as I see. So for her hair, this is a little trickier. If I move my transparency down, we see there's a lot of kind of funky things going on. So with my transparency really low, I'm going to try and pick up some of these strands here and see if that picks up. It really doesn't. And if I make my brush bigger, sometimes that can pick up more. And sometimes it just kind of wreaks havoc. So we'll see what that does. Oh, that actually did pick up some of them. So it's getting some of it, but it's also going to put kind of a black halo behind that, which is not what we want. But we'll see what we can pick up here. We also don't want it to be a very clean line around the hair. And right now I'm working at almost zero transparency, and see how that's not picking that up very well? But we'll go in and paint some of that out. So if I can get some of this broken up, I would be happy. With this kind of a cut, don't worry about getting every little hair. You just really won't. But if you can break up that edge a little bit, that would be good. See if I can increase my brush size again here. Sometimes the keyboard shortcuts work in this dialog and sometimes they don't. I'm not entirely sure why. Alright, that picked up some of it. And that's not picking up a lot of the hair. So I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. And if I zoom in again here, you can see this was the old cut. This is the new cut. It's getting a little better. It's kind of really fuzzy around those edges, and honestly, for a lot of covers, that's probably about as far as you really actually need to go. If you have a lighter background, you're going to have a little bit more problems there. And what I'll do just briefly here is make sure I have my black and take out some of the more scrubby parts of this, as that just does not look very good. And that I'm actually going to leave. That's a little odd right there, but for the most part, that's not too bad. That might be some of the best you're going to get with that. Now, there is a way I can get it a little bit better. So I'm actually going to turn off my layer mask here and go to adjustment layers, do a levels adjustment. I will clip mask that to this layer, and then I'm going to play with the levels until it shows a bit more contrast. And this is not an exact science. Just still not going to get a whole lot of contrast here. Mostly I'm trying to bring out these hairs right here. So see, I don't know if I want to merge those layers. Yeah, I'm going to merge those layers. I'm going to merge those layers and then click on the mask from my layer below, original layer, and drag it up while holding Alt, and that will replace this mask. So I'm going to go in again to the select and mask, take my transparency up a little bit, and see if it can get just a slightly better selection here. It didn't do a whole lot. Actually, the old one might be better. So yeah, sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't really. So I'm actually going to go back to the original there. And with this, like the one before, I'm going to duplicate it and set the bottom one to multiply. This time, I'm not going to do a lot of painting out. There's a few areas that I do want to darken, like around here. And there's a few areas that I don't want darkened, like that's a little too dark down there. So I'm going to not have that as dark there. Actually, that really was the only area that I wanted with that, so I'm gonna select it, invert it with Control-Shift-I, and then fill it with my foreground color, which is black, by Alt-Backspace. So this is a really tricky photo to make a selection from, and there are some ways to do it a little better, and I'm going to show you channel selection in a moment with another photo. But for a decent start, that's not going to be too bad. You're going to have to clean up just a little bit around here. And here too is where a little bit of painting actually comes in handy as well. So I'm going to put another layer here, set it to the clone brush, and I'm going to pick up a paintbrush I have that is just basically 3 dots. And get rid of my dialog. So I'm going to make that pretty small, and I have my clone brush set to pick up all layers, so it'll pick up everything underneath this. So I'm going to set it in a nice dense area and then just start painting some of this to get rid of some of that scrubbiness and make it look more like hair coming through here versus this really scrubby looking thing. This is actually one of artist Marta Dalig's brushes. I highly recommend tracking down her free hair brushes, or character brushes, I should say. And it's nothing super special, but it is very handy. Just enough to kind of make that less scrubby, and that's pretty rough. I'd usually spend a lot more time on this. And you want to break it up so it doesn't look super painted, unless you're going for a painted look. Sometimes that is nice. But for right now, I'm just trying to make it not quite as scrubby looking. And if you make it smaller, you can get some very small strands going on in there. So that's really quick, but basically how you can kind of touch this up when you have a really difficult hair selection. So without that, it was pretty scrubby looking, and with that, it really smooths it over. And let's say I'd fix this down here. Oops. Yeah, there it's looking a lot more like natural hair. So if you have a really difficult hair selection, you probably will be doing at least a little bit of painting to clean it up.